Napoleon, returning from the disastrous Russian campaign, gathers the remnants of his grande armée along the western borders of France. His forces are diminished but still disciplined, with veterans who have survived the harsh winter and battles in Russia and Germany. As he reorganizes his troops, he faces the challenge of confronting the coalition armies gathering across Europe. In October 1813, the forces of Austria, Prussia, Russia, and Sweden converge near Leipzig, prepared to encircle and destroy Napoleon's army. Napoleon positions his forces strategically around Leipzig, creating three main defensive sectors. On the northeast, he places Marshal Ney with approximately 80 men, tasked with holding the bridges and preventing the coalition from cutting off retreat routes. In the center, Marshal MacDonald commands around 70 troops to hold the line and support both flanks as needed. On the southern flank, Marshal Oudinot and Davout position 60 men to maintain contact with the western approach, guarding routes back toward France. Each corps is subdivided into infantry, cavalry, and artillery units, with batteries positioned to maximize crossfire along key roads and choke points. On October 16, the battle begins with coalition forces attacking the northern and eastern approaches. Prussian and Russian infantry advance in coordinated columns, supported by heavy artillery that opens fire on French positions. Napoleon responds with cavalry charges led by Ney, striking at exposed enemy flanks. These charges momentarily disrupt the coalition columns, forcing them to regroup under fire. Artillery duels erupt across the field, shells cutting paths through the dense formations. By midday, the coalition advances on the southern and western sectors. Austrian infantry marches in dense lines, while Swedish and Saxon units attempt to flank the French right. Davout's forces counterattack, using rapid infantry volleys and cannon fire to stall the enemy. Cavalry skirmishes erupt along open fields, as French cuirassiers charge against enemy cavalry attempting to exploit gaps. Napoleon coordinates movements using couriers and signals, shuttling reinforcements from the center to threatened sectors. On October 17, fighting intensifies as Napoleon orders counter-offensives to reclaim lost ground. Ney launches a coordinated assault on the Prussian lines in the north, supported by heavy artillery barrages. Infantry units move in echelon formation, aiming to push back enemy forces while maintaining defensive cohesion. In the south, Davout maneuvers troops to cut off advancing Austrian columns, forcing them into defensive positions behind hedgerows and small villages. Napoleon personally oversees troop movements, riding along key positions to inspire officers and ensure coordination. The battle on October 18 becomes a contest of attrition. Coalition forces attempt to encircle Leipzig completely, coordinating simultaneous assaults on multiple fronts. MacDonald holds the center, repelling repeated attacks while sending cavalry reinforcements to threatened sectors. Ney's troops face relentless pressure but manage to maintain the bridges, buying precious time for retreat options. Artillery exchanges reach devastating intensity, with cannon fire leveling villages and fields, leaving smoke and chaos across the battlefield. By October 19, the French situation deteriorates. Coalition armies achieve partial encirclement, cutting off key supply lines. Napoleon orders a general retreat toward the west, intending to regroup across the Elster River. However, a premature destruction of the bridges leaves approximately 30 French soldiers trapped, captured by advancing coalition forces. Napoleon's retreat is organized under constant harassment, as pursuing enemy cavalry targets stragglers and isolated units. The remnants of the Grande Armée withdraw toward France, facing logistical difficulties, fatigue, and demoralization among troops. Crossing into France, Napoleon begins reorganizing his forces to defend against the advancing coalition. By early 1814, Allied armies press into northeastern France, aiming to capture Paris. Napoleon employs the strategy of interior lines, rapidly shifting troops between threatened sectors to engage isolated enemy columns. Battles at Brienne-la-Ville and La Rothière result in tactical victories for Napoleon, using swift infantry maneuvers and concentrated artillery fire. At Champaubert, Napoleon employs feigned retreats to lure enemy units into traps, striking with concentrated attacks that rout segments of the opposing forces. Despite these successes, the coalition's numerical advantage and persistent pressure create insurmountable challenges. Logistics are strained. French troops face shortages of food, ammunition, and reinforcements. In successive engagements, French forces are gradually worn down. At Montmirail and Vauchamp, Napoleon's maneuvers achieve local tactical superiority, but the overarching strategic situation continues to favor the Allies. In March 1814, coalition armies close on Paris. Napoleon attempts to defend the city, but the disparity in numbers and exhaustion of his forces lead to a French defeat. Allied troops enter Paris, and Napoleon, recognizing the impossibility of further resistance, abdicates on April 6, 1814. He is exiled to the island of Elba, where he is given sovereignty over the small territory, but remains isolated from the European continent. Less than a year later, in February 1815, Napoleon escapes from Elba and lands in southern France. His return sparks widespread enthusiasm among the French populace and the army. Soldiers who had previously served under him rejoin voluntarily, swelling his forces to tens of thousands. Recognizing the urgent need to strike before coalition forces consolidate, Napoleon advances northward, aiming to disrupt the Allies' coordination. The campaign begins with the Battle of Ligny on June 16, 1815. Napoleon faces Prussian forces under Blücher. French troops are arranged to exploit terrain features, using a combination of frontal assaults and flanking maneuvers. Infantry columns advance steadily, supported by artillery barrages that target enemy positions. Cavalry units execute charges against exposed Prussian wings, breaking through initial defenses. By the afternoon, French forces achieve a tactical victory, forcing Prussians to retreat toward Wavre. Simultaneously, Wellington's Anglo-Allied army occupies defensive positions near Quatre Bras. Napoleon detaches forces to engage Wellington, but Wellington's disciplined infantry squares and strategic use of terrain resist French assaults. Skirmishes continue until both armies prepare for the decisive confrontation at Waterloo. On June 18, 1815, the Battle of Waterloo begins. Napoleon positions his forces centrally, intending to strike the Anglo-Allied army before the Prussian forces can arrive. French infantry advances in multiple columns, with artillery batteries opening fire to soften enemy defenses. Early attacks focus on strategic points, the farm of Hougoumont on the right flank and La Haye-Sainte in the center. Cavalry units repeatedly charge to exploit gaps, but Wellington's troops maintain disciplined formations, repelling assaults with musket and cannon fire. By midday, the French managed to capture portions of La Haye-Sainte, forcing Wellington to commit reserves to stabilize the center. Napoleon orders a series of attacks along the flanks, attempting to encircle the Anglo-Allied forces. Heavy rain has turned the battlefield into mud, slowing French artillery and reducing the effectiveness of cavalry charges. Coordination becomes difficult, with units losing cohesion under fire and adverse conditions. In the late afternoon, Blücher's Prussian forces arrive from the east. They engage the French right flank, forcing Napoleon to divert troops from the main assault. Prussian artillery and infantry pressure increases, threatening the French center and rear. Napoleon commits the Imperial Guard, his elite reserve, in a final attempt to break Wellington's center. Despite fierce fighting, the Guard is repulsed, suffering heavy casualties and losing cohesion. As evening approaches, French forces begin an organized withdrawal under pressure from both Wellington and Blücher. Napoleon's army disintegrates into retreating units, pursued relentlessly by coalition cavalry. By nightfall, French resistance collapses entirely. Napoleon is forced to abdicate once more on June 22, 1815. Following his second abdication, Napoleon is captured and exiled to St. Helena in the South Atlantic. The remote island ensures he cannot return to Europe. His military campaigns end definitively, and he spends the remainder of his life in confinement, reflecting on his rise and fall.